Hello, everybody. I should have moved this a little closer before I started. Welcome to the 17th episode of Code Break. I feel like I got maybe 20 or 30 more to go before I'm doing this halfway correct. Normally, this is the part where before I got into the tech stuff, I would just kind of tell you what's going on in my life, real quick, just some, fun stuff. I am not going to do that today because I am just not in the right place for that. I will, however, use this opportunity to remind people that you should consider therapy if you need someone to speak to, a good, safe, third party, neutral person to speak to. I have used therapy a couple times in my life, and it has been life saving. It has been very nice, not in terms of speaking to somebody and they tell you, "Oh, just do X and your problem solved." At least for me, it's been very helpful in terms of just being able to say what's on my mind and hearing that you're not completely crazy. Um, that was far more helpful than sometimes even just some of the solutions. Just being able to talk. So just keep that in mind. You being all the thousands of people watching the stream right now, you are more than welcome to reach out to me directly if you want to talk more about therapy and benefits and et cetera, et cetera. Uh, so, with that, let's actually get into the main gist of what I want to talk to y'all today about. And that is building a blog, and specifically building a blog like it's 1990. Um, I should give I should give some context to that. So I've been working on the web since 93 or so. Um, I started in college before I graduated in CSA Mosaic, very early browsers. And when I left college, I went into web development. And back then, you kind of did everything. And I'm gonna try my best not to do the I'm an old guy and here's all the stuff I did. But you do have to hear some history. I apologize. So back then, I did have to kind of do everything. I didn't do the design so much because I wasn't good at Photoshop. Work at Adobe, I'm still not good at Photoshop. Uh, but I build the HTML from PSD comps, and at least when it started, if you wanted to do anything dynamic, uh, you were using a Perl CGI script. And when I realized that on the design side, I was very strong, but on the Perl side, I could have some fun there. That's kind of where I gravitated. So I would typically just build websites to a spec, to a PSD spec. Um, and let me just share this real quick. Rod, thank you for hearing me out. I appreciate that. Um, Back then, the web platform was so limited that you did kinda have to resort to server-side code, and for me, at least, that was Perl CGI scripts. It was a heck of a lot of form processing. That sounds ridiculous, but you really needed something just to handle contact forms, or just to handle, you know, basic, um anything dynamic. If you wanted the ability to like enter something in a form, hit submit, and then get a dynamic web page back, you pretty much needed Perl CGI. And I did that for a year or two. And then outside of that, the rest of my HTML, the rest of my website was these handcrafted web pages. Um, couldn't even tell you what editor I was using back then. I know I'm not sure when Homesite came out. I know it wasn't free, so I may not have used that, but I used to use Homesite quite a bit. I'm pretty sure I used Windows Notepad as well, just because it was there. Um, but again, I did that for a couple of years, and then we had a client come in I will say 98-ish or so. And they wanted to do something that was radical. Well, it was radical to me. And that was talk to SQL Server. They were, I believe, a plant site, and they had a SQL Server database with plants, and they wanted a website that they could put the plants on the website and so forth. And I knew that Perl could talk to SQL Server. I wasn't looking forward to it. Like I was like, it's gonna be too hard. So I went onto a search engine back then, maybe Alta Vista. I don't remember. It was a long, long time ago. And Cold Fusion came up. And I remember downloading Cold Fusion and talking to a database in like half an hour and just kind of being like enamored, like, oh, this is really, really nice. And for those of you who don't know Cold Fusion, you may know PHP. And it followed this kind of similar thing where when I used to do the Perl CGI stuff, I'd have my HTML pages over here and then my Perl CGI script there and getting them to kind of connected and using similar layout and stuff. That was not terribly easy. But I remember writing Perl, I would take a copy of our site layout and put in a giant variable and kind of break that out. And it was just painful. And Cold Fusion, and again, PHP, same idea. I could just drop a page into my folder and do HTML stuff, but then also put these templates in there, put these variables inside my code, um, and build dynamic web pages and still have a custom layout. You still have my layout and so forth, and that was very enticing, especially the database part because we ended up getting all these clients who wanted to hook up their database to their website. And I did that for 10 years, and it was fine. It helped me take care of my family, and when I started blogging and presenting, it was on Cool Fusion. Um, Fast forward a couple years, let's say 2013 or so, um, got kinda bored of doing the same thing, and some things were happening in the 2010s or so. People were talking about HTML5 and the web platform, and it was actually, after stagnating for many years, uh, web technologies were kinda leapfrogging, going quickly, evolving, JavaScript, CSS, HTML even as well. Um, this was really, really growing in a great way, such that maybe you didn't need to do everything in a $12,000 backend server. That's Cold Fusion, not PHP. Uh, and I started to look at a more client side development because it was less painful than it used to be. And I started to look at some of my websites that were database driven, again, using a app server. And I had not touched the database in like a year or two, just kind of like sitting there on a commercial application server using a commercial database when it just did not need all that. And I came across a tool at that time called Harp. And Harp was a static site generator. This was 2013 when I encountered it. And it was this interesting idea where you could have like an application server in your local development. And it was Cold Fusion slash PHP slash classic ASP like, where you can have layout and HTML and you can put tokens like current time or whatever and conditions and looping. And you could do all that, but then you would run a command line. Um, you would run it command line and spit out HTML. And I looked at all these Cold Fusion. I keep saying Cold Fusion because that's what I built, but again, this applied to PHP, .NET, whatever. I looked at all these dynamic websites that had databases where I wasn't changing anything for months or if not longer, and that were running a lot of stuff to output data that was essentially static. And one by one, I began to convert to just flat files, and it was intoxicating because all of a sudden I had less stuff to worry about. I had no application server security to worry about. I didn't have a database to worry about, and it wasn't necessarily 100% pain free, but it was very, very eye opening in terms of this is a new way that I could build stuff. So 10 more years, this space has still evolved quite a bit. It went from static sites to Jamstack, which I'm not one for marketing a lot, but I kind of like the Jamstack marketing term because whenever you would talk about static websites, and Brian Rinaldi and I, we did a book together, and I did presentations all across the world talking about this. It was always, yeah, it's static, but you can use JavaScript, you can use a build process to get data. You can definitely make it dynamic to cover what you lose from having an application server. Having a new term, having a new marketing term kind of helped move away from that kind of baggage of what people would expect. Now in 2024, I actually don't necessarily hear people talking about this. I think it's just kind of assumed almost that, if you don't need an application server, there are multiple tools out there that let you do these kinds of things in a simple way. By the way, I will point out, I got into dynamic stuff with Perl CGI scripts because that was the only way. Apparently, Apache actually let you enable things like doing includes, like executing shell scripts right from HTML, which sounds dangerous as hell. Um, so I'm kind of glad I never actually used that feature. But with that, let me actually kind of switch over here. Give me 1 second. Whenever I move the screen over, I will say, like a beard. Yeah, Halloween, I shaved the beard because it did not go with my costume. If you follow me on social media, and I'm on Blue Sky, primarily Mastodon as well, I shared a picture there. I'm not gonna share it on screen. Like y'all can look that stuff up. I will say I was glorious and magnificent in my costume. But let us switch to our layout. Once again, I will send a quick shout out to the show sponsor, Jam, a free extension to help with bug reporting. And I know I say this every time, but it's true. And I've been through this pain. If you're trying to work with somebody remotely who is finding an issue with your website and they're not a technical person, you really can't tell them to just open up DevTools and tell you what's there because that could take forever. So Jam is a free screen recording browser extension that will include all of that data in there. Has integration with popular issue trackers like Jira, Asana, GitHub, etc. Great tool. I thank them profusely. I think they've been sponsoring for 6 months, and I get to say I'm a professional streamer because I have a sponsor. At least that's what I tell my kids. But thanks to them, I'll also, real quick, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or who is the giant person standing behind me. Um, I did a thing. I got this. Oh, you can't see my screen anymore. Hold on. There we go. I got this bad boy. That is a 7 foot tall Darth Vader from Home Depot. It's actually a pretty cool thing in that it has a Halloween accessory and a Christmas accessory. So you can cover two holidays, and this thing, like, I stand up and I'm used to being the tallest person in the room, and this thing just blows me away. Kind of a pain in the butt to put together. This is not where it's gonna stay because there's still a part of me that, like, flinches every time I see this big shadowy figure behind me. Um, but he's not plugged in now because he'd be constantly telling me various quotes and stuff. But today I want to talk about Eleventy. So I mentioned that I got into this idea of static site generators, and Harp.js was the first one. And Harp.js, the website still exists, but it's not really a active project anymore. And I'm happy I found it because in terms of a static site generator, it was kind of limited. You heard my stammer there a bit. It was simple. And I'm glad that was my first tool, and I wasn't, like, overwhelmed with, a tool that had, like, 20 different features. But after using HAR for a while and kind of running into its limitations, I started looking at other generators out there. I tried Hugo for a while. Hugo was, interesting, very powerful, very quick, but I did not like some of the ways that it did things, just personal preference. Um, I will say it was very fast. So I one of the things I tried was converting my blog, which had been dynamic with Cold Fusion and then WordPress, and even 10 years ago had over 5,000 blog posts. I tried seeing if my blog could run in this type of metaphor, and in Harp.js, it just I think it just died. Like it was like no way. Hugo was actually able to process the entire blog in like 15 seconds or some absurd amount of time. But I didn't like Hugo, so I didn't stay with Hugo for too long. I went to Jekyll, and Jekyll I liked a lot. Jekyll felt very powerful. Felt like I could do anything I wanted to. The issue with Jekyll is that it ran on Ruby, and if you've ever tried to install Ruby on Windows, it is like putting a square peg in a round hole. It is not easy. Um, I would do it and then I'd be fine. But if I ever needed to reinstall, I was looking for at like a day or more. Not really a day. I was looking at a lot of pain. So I discovered Eleventy. I don't know when I discovered Eleventy. So let's quickly go to my blog and look at my Eleventy tag, and you could see I first said why I'm digging Eleventy back in 2019. Um, I got into Eleventy for a couple of reasons. One, it was Node.js based, and the other big reason is that most of these static site generators they use a template language. And that's how you do the dynamic bits, and you're going to see this in action. Um, and languages, like we all know, uh, they all pretty much do the same thing. You know, they have conditions, they have looping, they have ways of processing logic. But some languages are just more in sync with how you think than others. One of the reasons I liked Jekyll, despite the Ruby issue, was that it used Liquid.js, and I really dug Liquid.js. I got excited about Eleventy again because it was node based, but also because it supported like 11 different template languages. I'm trying to find, yeah, here's the list. So it supported Markdown, it supported Nunjux. That's a template language by Mozilla. Handlebars was one I kind of liked in the past. Liquid, again, I already liked it. Supported Pug, which is Jade, I believe it was in the past. Hate it, but I didn't have to use it. And supported EJS as well. If you've never seen EJS, it's a lot like um, classic ASP. Ugly but flexible. When I saw that, I'm like, oh, so I don't need to worry about Ruby, and I could use any language of my choosing, pretty much. I could probably get things done, and I started to play with it. As you can look at my blog, I have 109 blog posts on it. It just really worked with me. And in fact, at some point, yeah, February. So in of 2019, October 12th, I talked about why I was digging it. And then on February 7th, 2020, so that's 4 months later, I went ahead and migrated, my blog over to it. I should say I had been running Jekyll and then Hugo before that. The process of moving to a static site generator for my blog, it was not trivial. uh, my site was rather large. I wanted to maintain the URLs and stuff. It was not necessarily an easy task. And one of the things that uh, I used to say when I presented a lot more on static site generators is that uh, they still have complexity, but the complexity tends to be in your local environment. So Right now, like my blog's setup, I feel is non-trivial. Not sure I'd call it complex, uh, but it's non-trivial. You know, it's handling a lot of files. It's doing a lot of things. All that complexity is on my local machine. When my site is deployed publicly, uh, it comes out as flat files and it's enhanced with JavaScript. There's a couple serverless functions for a few small things, but my dependencies are remarkably small. So I have complexity locally. I don't have it in production. So I really, really like Eleventy, and what we're going to do is we're going to go through the process of and kind of building an incredibly simple blog, and we'll see how much we get done, and we may do a part two and a part three, and make this more complex. Um, this is the documentation, and I did have a banner for this. There it is, Eleventy.dev. First year I used it, I could never remember the darn URL. Not that that's difficult, 11ty.dev. But yes, I struggled to remember it. And we are in the docs right now. I already have Eleventy installed as a command line, but we'll scroll down and you could see that is the command you would use. You could also use npx as well, but I have installed Eleventy and I've installed it globally just to make it a little bit easier to use. And what you do is when you run Eleventy, it's going to look at your source directory and just try to process everything. Let me turn off that banner real quick so it's not obscuring. All right. All it's going to do is process its source file. So let's look at an example of that. I'm in a folder called blog one. I'm going to make a new file called index.md. So for Markdown, great thing about Markdown is that if you forget the Markdown syntax for something, like I always forget the syntax for tables, you can just do HTML. So I will say, welcome to my blog. What should our blog be about? Somebody give me an idea. Because if not, it's going to be a cat blog. And I know y'all don't want to see me do a cat blog. First good comment that I see. Um, Scott, you're not allowed to say the New York Giants, but Scott did say cats. And because he's first, he wins. So, welcome to my cat blog. And I'm just going to type some random stuff here. I am assuming most developers are familiar with Markdown. Just in case you're not, that pound means H1. And if you have line breaks, if you have, I should say, I guess, two line breaks, this becomes automatically paragraphs. So I'm going to save this. And just to be sure, open the preview. Yep, I didn't screw up my simple Markdown. What I can do then is in Eleventy and make this bigger. Actually, let me do it here. There we go. I'm just going to run Eleventy. And what we'll see is that it looked at the source directory. It automatically scanned all the files, all one file, and it wrote to a folder called underscore site index.html. And if we open that up, we get HTML. So I just built a very fancy Markdown converter. Now, one kind of cool thing is that you can actually run Eleventy serve, and this will run and constantly monitor your source files and keep updating, as well as opening up a local server. And that, of course, went to the wrong window. Give me 1 second. Go back here, go back there, Comsa like that. Why do you keep doing that? Keep going to the wrong window. I'm just going to copy and paste like that. And there we go. We have a server, and it is uh, file name based. So I used index.md, and it made a file called index.html. If I make a new file, cats.md, and say these are cats, Here are my cats. You'll notice it actually made a new folder for that called cats with an index.html. And if I go in here and just make a link, see my cats, and this is how you do a link in Markdown. We go back, there are my cats. And if I click, there we go. So far, so good. Like a very kind of basic um, Markdown processor. No lorem, no. I'm probably 2,000 Visual Studio Code extensions for that. I typically go to a website when I need, proper looking lorem ipsum, and there is a cat lorem ipsum uh, tool out there. So that that's like the basics. That's like real simple. Uh, but let's actually start using some of the built-in template languages here. And I'm just kind of skimming over all this. This is all the quick start. We don't need this. I'm going to make a liquid file, and I'm going to call this more cats, and just give it an extension of liquid. All right. The second I make the file, because I am running Eleventy serve, it goes ahead and processes it. In this case, it's an empty file. So my morecats.index.html is empty. That's to be expected. I will say h1 hello world and like so, and just confirm that it output hello world, no problem. And then start writing some basic liquid. If you've never seen liquid before, it's not too crazy. It uses bracket percentile for declarations or for like logic, you could say, and bracket for actually outputting stuff. So I can say my name is bracket name and save it. And if we go look at the output, we could see my name is cats. So again, I was doing this in Cold Fusion, PHP, etc. You could even do things like if name equals cats, say you have a good name, like that. End it with a end if declaration. This is all documented on the Liquid.js website if you wanted to take a look. And if we see the output, you have a good name. And if I just change that name to dogs, I should see my name is dogs, and I should not see that second paragraph. And then bam, it's gone. So just to be clear, now I kind of have like an application server. I have basic logic. I can even do looping. I don't remember how to define an array in Liquid, so I'm not going to do that. I'll show an example of looping later, but you can do loopings. You can do conditions. You can do looping. And again, I have a site folder for my output that has no dependencies at all. It's just HTML. So let's take a next step and think about, one of the main things that I would do when I would work in an application server like Cool Fusion, PHP, etc., is that I would build a layout file. And that layout file would basically look like here's the HTML on top with a marker, and here's the HTML on bottom. And then all of my websites, all my pages, I would build my stuff here, right? I'd build my homepage, my about page, my contact me page, and I wouldn't have to worry if I changed my site layout because I was using another template essentially to handle what that layout is. Eleventy supports that very simply, and it supports it using front matter. And front matter is just going to be some metadata on top of your page. And you can see I've added three dashes per line to set this up. And your metadata can actually be anything. But if I do layout and give it a name, Eleventy is going to look for a file that handles my layout. So we'll call this main, and 11 is going to throw an error because I don't have it yet. That's right. You're trying to use a layout that does not exist. So by default, 11 will look in a underscore includes folder, and it's looking for a file called main, and I'm going to make a new file called main.liquid and say, this is my layout, save it, and 11 is working again. But let's actually look and see what happened. Let's go back over here. And there you go. So now I'm only seeing my layout. I need to actually include the page that was put in there. I'm going to go back to my layout file. Let's actually make this a little bit more real. I just scaffolded a quick HTML thing, and we are going to include contents. Either content or contents. I always forget, but we'll save it and go back and look and see that it is not there. Make it content because obviously I was just teasing y'all. And there we go. And if we go to my cats, oh, actually let's actually start doing stuff in this layout file. I'm gonna do an inline style. We'll make it better in a little bit later. Let's say a background color of pink. And we will surround our content in a main tag, and we will do some styling on main to make it stick out a little bit. Like a good pink. I may do a little bit less bright. But we'll make our main section white, and we'll put some padding around it of, let's say, 50 px. And now if we go here, we should see, bam, we have a pink layout. We have some white block in the middle, and we have text. I could make that text bigger with my CSS, but that's okay for right now. And then I need to start using this layout everywhere. Like if I go to the cats page, it's not using it. So I will go to cats, and I'm just going to literally copy and paste. Oops. Copy and paste that metadata, that front matter, drop it into my cats file. And now it's got my layout. And you know what? That's very, very true. Brian, I'm not showing your second comment where you said that you knew nothing, that, that I know nothing. Um, yes, yes. I am very good at web design. I happen to like pink. I think it's a nice color. I like these nice light pastel colors on a web page. It's everything is black and white nowadays. So I like some color. Color makes me happy. So in 15 minutes, I have a simple application server that's basically translating Liquid.js, translating Markdown, outputting to a folder called site. Um, I could literally take the output of site and drag it to an S3 folder, an S3 folder that has the settings for web serving, and have a website up. That's absolutely not what I do from my blog. I'm hosting on Netlify. It's tied to a GitHub repository. So I check in a GitHub file. I check in a file to GitHub, and it kicks off a process where Netlify grabs it, runs Eleventy, copies the files over, and it's all automated. But if I didn't want to do all that automation, I could literally just copy and paste site. Or heck, if I am a one person shop and my web server is the box that's like beneath my feet, and I'm running Apache, I could literally tell Apache, say, hey, for this web server, your root is this site folder, and just go to town with that. If I need to make an update, run 11 update my layout, and then just know that the site folder has an HTML version, a static version with no dependencies for my blog. Cool. So let's keep working on this. So I mentioned that front matter can do um, a couple things. In this case, I specified a layout. Eleventy has a couple of things that it looks for in the metadata, and everything else it just ignores and just becomes data. So if I go in here and say title, the cat blog, I now have that data available to my templates. Now, where that comes into play is that I can go into my layout and say, you know what? I want you to output title, and it's going to pick that up from the page. And if we go back here and reload, and that may be a little hard to see on the screen, but it picked up my title from that metadata. I could even use that in my page as well if I wanted to, but that gets the job done. So let's now think about what we would do for a blog. So a blog would have a welcome page, or a welcome. I'm gonna get rid of everything else. I'll keep a paragraph and like intro, and now I want to actually start writing blog posts. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a folder. I'm gonna call it post. Yes, that's very imaginative. And in that folder, I'm gonna start putting blog posts. And I'm just gonna write first dash post.md like that. And I'm gonna copy over the front matter. I'm gonna be consistent about that. And I'll say this title, this is the first post, and say welcome to my blog. It is the awesome, nice and simple. If I look at my output directory, I can see it's actually already there. Post slash first dash post slash index dot html. But my question is, how do I how do I build my homepage such that I can do what a typical blog post does and grab the first 10 posts and show them? Well, one of the things we can use is make use of an Eleventy feature called collections. And let me actually find that in the docs. And there we go. So collections are basically a way to take content and group them together into a collection. And one of the ways I should say that Eleventy does that is by using a tags attribute in your front matter. So you see here in their example, they have tags post. The second you do that, Eleventy will say, hey, I have a variable called collections, and anything that has a particular tag name, I will group together under that. And you can see right here, this is exactly what we're looking for, the ability to loop over everything in that collection, specifically a collection called post. This is a liquid example. I mentioned I was going to do a loop at some point, but here it is. And by the way, that dash, if I remember right, that just reduces the white space output, if you care about that. But let's actually try this. I have my blog post, my first one. We will give it a tag value of post. And then now in theory, I can go to my homepage and I'm gonna go ahead and switch this to liquid. So we're gonna rename this to index.liquid. My markdown is gonna break, but that's all right. I'll just say, welcome to my blog. I can write HTML. I've been doing it for way too long. Go ahead and drop a paragraph tag in here. And that's not the cleanest HTML, but then I'm just gonna copy and paste right from their code. All right, so UL iterating over collections.post. Again, this is automatic behavior from Eleventy because I used that tags value right there. It will automatically be dropped into that collection. I'm gonna save it, and then in theory, we'll go back to my home page, and there it is. Like, bam, automatic. And if I go in here, let's make another post. We'll call it the because I'm so creative. Second post, not markdown. I'm going to copy everything from the first post, change the title. This is the second post. And we'll say more awesomeness. Meow. The second I added this second template in there, I got bam, collection data like already automated. Now, what's kind of cool is that when Eleventy recognized that that file had the metadata for tags, and it's all right, I'm going to put you in a collection, I'm going to put you in this bucket. It gave me access to information about that particular page. And then let's go back here. So you see where I did post.data.title? I can actually also link to it. And I tend to forget. Post.data should give me an object. Let's see what it outputs. Object output. I believe, let me try this and then I'll explain what I'm doing. Yeah, there we go. So one of the things that Liquid supports is the idea of building filter. So if I type some variable like that, um, it will just output the variable straight to the screen. Filters allow us to write functions to do things like string manipulation. If I had a long variable and I wanted to show a small part of it, an excerpt, if you will, which can come in handy for blogs. Uh, I would define that filter. I'd write it with code, and then I would say pipe and name of filter, and Liquid will take that value, pass it to the filter. The filter will return something, and that's what comes out on screen. One of the built-in filters we have in Eleventy is log that just goes out to console.log. And you could see I get a lot of data here, but what I am looking for is the link, which is going to be URL. So if I want to see, I think it's just post dot URL. Let's see what happens. Go back here, and then bam, that worked. And this is all automatic. If I change the file name, I'll get a new location under site. That URL would just work. So I'm going to get rid of this and just put it into an A tag, an anchor tag, like so. So now in theory, I've got blog posts with links. Let's click, and it worked. And a little bit of caching there. All right, we'll go back. And so first thing I realized I need, I'm going to go into my layout file. We're going to add a footer at the bottom and a very old school menu, ahref equals home, like that. And let's see. Yes, I have a home. I go into second and click home. Now I can navigate. This is a very ugly blog, but it's working. Hmm. So the next thing I want to do, a couple of things that I want to do. At some point, I'm going to need possibly to limit the number of blogs here. So if I have, I'll just randomly say 6,500 or so blog posts, I don't want a homepage that shows all of them. So I'm gonna need to do some kind of logic. Typically, the top 10 or so. I'm gonna need to do that. I'm also gonna need to do dates. Now, I could put any data I want to in my file, so I can just add. Let's go to my first post. I could say like published and do what is today, 11/7/2024. I can do that. All right, and we can actually render this out in the blog post. Let's see if that works. It's the first blog post. Yeah. So something that I didn't mention, another Eleventy feature, is that your markdown files can actually use a template engine as well, and you can configure this. And that's I feel bad. Something else I didn't mention is that everything like the layouts being an underscore includes, the output being an underscore site, every single aspect of that you can tweak. You could change it to match whatever makes sense for you. I'm just doing defaults because this is the first session and we're kind of keeping it simple. But one of those options is, hey, Markdown files, if you want to put some template logic in there, I could automatically run it through Liquid or EJS or whatever. Liquid is the default, and that's what allowed me to just drop in some Liquid code there and have it output. So I could just use published, but if we go to the docs, there is actually a whole section on setting a content date. And what they are saying, and I won't read from this, I'll just kind of skim the top level stuff, is that if you add date to it, this is something that Eleventy can pick up on and do stuff with. And you'll see an example of that in a moment. There's also some special variables for things like, excuse me, get last modified if you want that, get created, etc. You can get fancy and so forth. Um, I don't want to do that. So instead, what I'm going to do is just follow their lead here and add a date. And I'm pretty sure that's year, month, date. We're going to find out real quick when I do year 24, month is 11, and date is 07. And we will pretend, actually, we'll make that the 5th. We'll make that 2 days ago, which was Tuesday. Let's not talk about Tuesday. Um, and we'll pretend our second post, like in the real world, would have been written today. So now we have dates on here. For the heck of it, let's, if I click around, like I always say this, if I click around too fast, y'all let me know. Rod has this good question. When iterating over the blog posts, are they sorted in some matter, creation, date, alphabetical, etc.? Is there a built-in functionality to control that? Thank you for asking that because that's exactly what we're going to show right now. So I've added dates. Let's go back to our index file and we will add a published part or a date, post.data.date. So we can see what day it was published. Go back to our home page and I'll reload it. Excuse me. And that is the default behavior where it took in my just typed in date and it turned it into a full date time object with hours and stuff like that. I can absolutely format this. To Rod's question, don't believe there is any default sorting to override the default date file or customize how it is sorted in a collection. Let's see. First is still coming up first because it is the earliest. If we change the first to, let's say, next year, let's see if second moves up. Go back here. It did. So yes, it is default sorting in earliest first. Hmm. So that that is a default sort. We probably want it to be newest first. Let's first fix this post so it's properly dated. Go back and convert, right? If we want to reverse this, there's actually a built-in way of doing that in Liquid where you could pass a filter. And it's either reverse or reversed. I will type reverse, excuse me, and see if that worked. Reload. It did not. I know Eleventy has an example of this. Custom date, dates off by 1 day. Not worried about that. Collections. Let's try reversed. By the way, this did nothing which is a good reminder that Liquid has a default behavior of if you ask it to run a filter that doesn't exist, Liquid ignores it. I hate that behavior. You could turn that off. And one nice thing about Eleventy is that it allows you to say, Eleventy will suck in these template languages, and it has default configuration. You can tweak that configuration yourself. So I'm gonna say reversed, and I think that will solve it. I could have sworn, you know what? Let's cheat. Let's go look at my source code for my blog because I know I'm doing this. I know it's much simpler as I think it is. Or no, let's just do that. Raymond Camden 2003. So this is definitely a more complex version of what we're doing now. And my posts are already sorted the right way. So that's not helpful. Let's do the 11 search because I swear I remember them mentioning eh, common pitfalls, reverse, cannot type a lie. I'm using reverse. I deploy. Work on this by explicit date matters. I know you had a real simple way to sort, not in code, Liquid's reverse filter. Uh-huh, there we go. I did it wrong. Because you can't do it in the conditional. So it is reverse. I think what you end up doing is saying assign sorted post equals collections dot post reverse. And then you loop over that. I think that's the solution. I swear I remember it being a little bit easier than this, but that worked. And I'll just go on record as I remember it being a little bit easier, but uh, that should do it. My second post is first, which is what I wanted. And like I said, we can definitely make those dates look a little bit nicer. But I want to do one more thing. So my blog post display is kind of vanilla. Typically, what I want is a standard way of showing a blog post. Well, one nice thing is that in Eleventy, you can chain layouts, which means you can have one layout say I'm wrapped in another layout, which is then wrapped in another layout, and so forth. So I'm going to go into my includes folder, which is where Eleventy was looking for layouts. I'm going to make a new one called post.liquid, and it is going to include its content. But every blog post should start with an H1 that shows the title and some data on top published on date, like that. Now, for my post to make use of this, I'm going to go into first post and just change that layout to post. I'm going to do that for second as well. And by the way, if you're thinking, I have 6,500 blog posts. Do I have to do this all of them? No. Eleventy has shortcuts for this folder of 1,000 files. Here's metadata I want to apply to all of them. So you don't have to do it kind of like by hand the way I'm doing. Uh, then I need to go into my post layout and say, hey, buddy, your layout is main. This is what will do my chaining of layouts. Now I go back to my blog post. I have forgot to close my H1. I've made that mistake for 30 years going on. There we go. How many of you saw that in the stream and were like Ray? Oh, Ray. And there we go. My blog post has the title automatically, has to publish automatically, has the blog content. If I go to the second one, it is all there. That pattern is easy enough. Rod, when did you share that comment? Which pattern? Gives me a chance to drink some water. Mm. I always forget that the actual stream is like 30, 40 seconds behind like me live. So I'll ask a question. I'm like, why aren't they answering me? They hate me. But no, you're just waiting to actually hear what I had to say. While I wait for Rod to answer, let's actually make the homepage a little bit nicer and a bit more real world. This is my blog about cats. I love cats, so should you. And go back, and there we go. It looks a little bit nicer. All right, Rob, when you get a chance, remind me what you were talking about when we were talking about patterns. It is the top of the hour. But if we ignore the first 15 minutes where I was rambling about how old I was and how I used to build websites uphill both way in the snow, um, let's say 30 minutes of work. We have a lot of what I used to use an expensive application server for and a database, right? I have a site layout that I could tweak. Like I want some margins on that. Let's do that real quick while I'm talking about what I did. I'll go in here and margin 50px. See what that does. Yeah, there we go. We have a course site layout. We have a blog homepage, and we have a way to render a blog post of newest first. We're not filtering by like the last 10. That's a problem for when Ray writes his, 8 more blog posts. We're showing the date, which is important for blog posts, especially for technical blog posts. You should always have a date on there. Sorted newest first. We have links automatically. And literally, like, if I get inspired and like I want to write a new blog post, I'll call it third.md. I'm going to copy and paste. And all I gotta do is tweak my metadata. This is third. This was published on the 8th, and the future is no comment, like so. And then I have a publishing platform. Um, Now I did lose some things, right? So I when I had my Cold Fusion based blog and when I had WordPress, I had a web based admin where I can go to a form and just type stuff away. Now I have to actually physically make a file, and that's a bit more work. But as a developer, I'm absolutely happy and fine with files. Um, without having a database, what happens if my files are erased? Well, that's true for any project at all. I would put this in GitHub, so I'd have that protection and not have to worry about it. But I have a basic blog. There's a heck of a lot more that we could do, and that we are going to do in the next session because I see it's the top of the hour. We'll talk more about doing things like formatting those date times, giving some configuration to Eleventy. I haven't even touched on how to configure Eleventy, so it's all defaults so far. But we'll talk about date formatting. Maybe we'll put a little excerpt on this homepage so you can see like maybe the first paragraph or so. We'll talk about that. And maybe we'll even get to publishing as well. Rod, so he was talking about the sorting of posts. Yes, it is absolutely customizable. And pictures of cats. And Mark, that actually, one of the things you run into real quick is what happens with assets like images and CSS. There is a slight issue with that. Not really an issue at all. Um, but next week, I think we're going to start with images and we're gonna move my CSS. Where did it go? Where did it go? We're gonna move my CSS into a style page, and we'll talk about one tweak you have to do with Eleventy to make that work. So we have stuff to do. We have more stuff that we can do, and it is exactly 1 o'clock. So I will stop rambling and come back over here and say thank y'all again. Great comments. I appreciated it. I needed it today. Thank you for attending. And the next session probably is going to be the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. Not a great week, I know. Hopefully, some people are still at their office on Tuesday. But 2 weeks from now, I'll be at Connect Tech, so I can't do a live stream there. Not easily. Anyway, again, thank you all for showing up. I appreciate each and every one of you. Stay safe and please look out for each other, especially now. Thank you.